Good morning, everyone. Welcome to today's hearing. Today we're going to continue hearing evidence from Mr. Peter Maddison of the TMO. So would you ask Mr. Maddison to come back in, please? Thank you. Good morning, Mr. Maddison.
Morning.
Right, ready to carry on?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Mr. Willett.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, members of the panel. Good morning, Mr. Maddison.
Good morning.
Now, yesterday we were exploring together FRA actions and the various meetings that you'd had from 2013 through to 2015 so far to examine those. Can I take a backwards or perhaps sideways step and look back at some of the other evidence? Just to see if I can reposition ourselves. Can I start by showing you Janice Ray's supplemental witness statement, please? This is at TMO 00873-629. It's dated 19th June 2020, which you can't see from this first page. If we go to page 15 in it, please, let's look together at paragraphs 64 and then over the page to 65. At 64, under the heading FRA tracker queries, she says this: I've been asked what prompted the generation of an FRA action spreadsheet. The TMO had approximately 650 blocks with communal areas that required an FRA, following the introduction of the Regulatory Reform Fire Safety Order in 2005. It was my view that a spreadsheet was the most effective way of tracking the progress of actions arising from Carl Stokes's FRA Significant Findings and Actions Plan, in that it allowed me to clearly see what was complete, partially complete and incomplete against the specified time frame. The spreadsheet also allowed me to, in more recent years, run reports and present high-level information at the Health and Safety Committee meetings about the numbers of outstanding actions and which teams were responsible for progressing them. And then she goes on to say this at paragraph 65. Additionally, the FRA action spreadsheet allowed me to send an extracted report to each team that had been allocated actions on at least bi-monthly basis by email. Additionally, teams could run their own reports, producing their own spreadsheet from the workflow on W2 or CRM. Whilst everyone could update their own spreadsheet, only Cyril Morris and I could close down actions, and only when sufficient evidence had been provided to confirm completion, Adrian Bowman did not close down actions. And there's more information about this in paragraphs 67 and 68. Now, Janice Ray says, as you can see, that she sent spreadsheets to each team on at least a bi-monthly basis by email. Did you receive spreadsheets or extracted reports relevant to your team by email from Janice Ray?
No, but I was aware that my team did receive reports, and so the reports that I was talking about yesterday were the high-level reports that were presented to the Health and Safety Committee, but my team had more detailed reports, and when I had occasion to delve into more detail, I would review those reports with my team.
So you say you didn't, but your team did receive spreadsheets or extracted reports showing required actions?
To the best of my recollection, that's right.
And would that apply to your project management team?
Yes. And
to your contract management team?
Yes.
Now, can we look at one of these FRA action documents? TMO 1002288. This is an FRA action plan item, Asset and Regeneration Building Services, and it dates from February 2013. We can see that from various entries within the document. Just for the record, for example, at page 102 for Cecil House or page 107 for Fulham Road. And we know that it was created from Doc Properties, the file name, on the 27th of February 2013 by Alex Oni, O-N-I. Now, this isn't a spreadsheet. It is a Word document, and it sets out, as you can see, various actions arising from the FRA. And if you go down the screen, you can see immediately on page 1 there are two which are high. This is Trellick Tower, June 2012. And if we just scroll down very gently onto page 2, you can see further high red priority FRA actions, in fact on page 2 for Grenfell Tower itself, arising out of the November 2012 FRA for that building. Just looking at this, was this the master list that was produced as a consequence of the 27th of February 2013 fire risk compliance meeting that we looked at yesterday?
I don't know.
You don't know. Were you sent this document, as far as you can recall?
I don't think I would have been, no.
You don't think you would have been? Do you recall ever seeing this document?
No.
Never.
I don't recall seeing this document. I mean, I haven't had sight of the reports that we were reviewing at the Health and Safety Committee that we discussed yesterday. I would have imagined it was more of that would be more of the high level report, which would give the number of actions at a high level by team, rather than this, which is the granular detail, which would be the reports that Janice Ray is referring to, that would be presented to the heads of service responsible for those areas.
Can we go to TMO 00869-725, please? 869-725. This is an email run from early March 2013. Can we go in that, please, to page 4? Now, at the very bottom of that, you can see on page 4 that there is an email from Janice Ray on the 4th of March 2013 to you and to John Borrer, subject FRA medium risk action plan items, A&R surveying, February 2013. And if we then scroll up, please, to the next page, page 3, we can see that there is an email at the bottom of page 3 from John Borrer a few minutes later, on the 4th of March, to David Gibson, copied to Peter Maddison. And John Borrer was the other recipient of Janice Ray's email that I just showed you on page 4. John Borrer sends it on to David Gibson, copied to you and Janice Ray, subject FRA medium risk action plan items, A&R surveying, February 2013. And he says, "Hi David, following my email last Friday enclosing the FRA high risk items, please find attached the FRA medium risk surveying items, which were allocated to Abby Acosta, a former capital programme project manager who left the organisation last year." Now, if we look at the attachment to that, that is at TMO 00869-726. 869-726. Now, this appears to be an excerpt from the master list document that we looked at before. Do you think that's correct?
I have no reason to believe it isn't.
Do you agree that it shows actions prioritised by the colour coding set out in the FRAs?
It appears to, yes.
Yes. Did you see this document when it was sent, or did you open this document when it was sent to you on the 4th of March by John Borrer?
I don't recall it specifically, but I think that from the previous email you showed me, I think that it would appear that the review of the fire risk assessment action process that I instigated when I first arrived at the TMO, this was part of this, understanding what the backlog actions were and making sure that the actions were allocated to the correct teams and that they were being progressed. So I think this is part of that process.
I mean, we can see from the email I've just shown you, because this is the attachment to it, that you did in fact receive this document. Okay. Would you accept that?
Yes, I'd take that at face value, yes.
Yes, and having received it, can we also proceed on the basis that you would have opened the attachment and read this document? Possibly, but it may have been that, I mean, from the dialogue that was happening, it would appear that the
purpose of this was to get the actions to the right team, so that's why it was allocated to David Gibson. So David's team would have been looking at the specific actions there.
Yes, but you were looped into that,
Yeah.
so that this document went through your hands. It didn't
Yes.
bypass you.
Yes, but I wouldn't necessarily have looked at the microscopic detail of it, but in terms of understanding that there were a set of actions that were needed and needed to be communicated to the right person who was handling those. So that was my role in that, I think.
Yes, right. So can we proceed on the basis that, at least in respect of this document at this stage in the process, early on after the request for the master list, you received and saw, at the very least, the extract from the master list which related to your teams?
In this case, yes.
In this case, yes. Can we then look at... and you would also therefore have understood from this document, pretty shortly after your tenure at the TMO, after the start of your tenure at the TMO, that how it was that FRA actions were prioritised, namely with red, amber and green.
Yes.
Yes. Can we go to TMO 100424942, please? Now, this is a spreadsheet. From the file name, we know that it is entitled Copy of FRA Actions Breakdown for Contract Management, as at 17th June 2014. You can't see it on the document, but it is called that in the file. Just looking at it, is this a document you recall seeing before?
No.
Can you help me to say whether it was generated from W2?
Possibly.
You may not have seen this precise one before, but do you recognise it as an example of the spreadsheets that Janice Ray was emailing?
I don't specifically, but it would look like a summary of actions with the responsible team and the lead on there.
Given that it was to do with FRA actions for contract management, there's no reason, is there, why Janice Ray wouldn't have sent this to you, even if for your information only?
I don't know. That wasn't the process that there was. So the actions were allocated directly to the contract management, the head of service, and so the team that was allocated within the contractors within the team, and they'll be communicated by the head of service, in this case Alex Bosman, back to Janice. The reports that I looked at and received on a regular basis were the more high-level overview reports of the number of actions by age.
Right, so is this right? Your evidence is that you never saw the spreadsheets like this, but you did see Word document action plan items such as the one we saw a moment ago?
Not such as the one we saw earlier, the sort of high-level report which would be presented to the Health and Safety Committee, which gave an overview of the whole team's allocated actions. So this was a level of detail that would be dealt with between Janice and the head of service.
Well, let's just be clear about this. Can we go back then to the previous document, TMO 00869-726? This is the one from February 2013, emailed to you on the 4th of March 2013 by John Borrer. Is the email from John Borrer to you on that date of this document the only instance when you received documents such as this, or were there other occasions when you received documents such as this?
I don't remember whether this was the only. There may have been other examples when I was asking for specific details of a specific issue where this sort of level of detail would be given.
Right.
But this wouldn't be routinely copied to me. This is sort of detail that would be copied to the head of service responsible for the actions.
But would you not want to see these documents on a regular basis? Clearly, Janice Ray and John Borrer thought you would have done, so that you could keep on top of some of the detail, if not every single piece of detail, of the outstanding FRA actions across the TMO stock.
So in this instance, there was clearly had been an issue. It appears that there were actions that had been allocated to a project manager who was no longer in the organisation, and that may have been an issue. So this appears that I had been involved in this trying to resolve something that wasn't working in the system, but in the system that was established from this point was that this sort of level of detail would go directly to the teams responsible, and I would be looking at a level of detail higher than this, which would give a summary of the age profile of actions rather than this level of detail. This was a part of my portfolio. I didn't have the skills or the ability to manage this sort of level of detail. I needed my teams to take responsibility.
Well, when you looked at or got documents showing a level of detail higher than this, giving a summary of the age profile, what documents were those?
There were reports that were sent to the Corporate Health and Safety Committee that I was part of.
And did those show red, amber and green priority levels?
I don't remember that they did. I think that they just gave the ageing profile, and what I would discuss with my team would be the more detailed progress of actions.
Right, but you knew, is this fair, from March 2013, very shortly after the discussion about the master list at the 27th of February 2013 meeting, that there were documents being generated by the health and safety team and sent out to the relevant teams, including yours, which did have a red, amber and green prioritisation system in them?
Yes.
Yeah, and there was nothing stopping you asking for those at any time if you hadn't received any and wanted to see them?
That's right.
So there would be nothing, is this right, to stop you putting the high-level document you got together with documents such as this that we can see on the screen, because you knew they existed?
That's yes.
Yes.
And sometimes that would happen in my conversations with my team about how we progressed some of these issues.
Did you ever have cause to ask John Borrow or perhaps Alex Bosman, as a better example, for the granular spreadsheets that Janice Ray was sending him directly?
I wouldn't say the granular spreadsheets, but we would discuss issues that arose from those spreadsheets. So if there was particular issues, we would review the detail and understand what some of the issues that needed to be addressed were.
So you did know that spreadsheets such as the Excel spreadsheet I've just shown you, not this document, but the one previous, existed?
Yes.
I see. So you could call for those at any time if you needed?
Yes, but I wasn't copied into them routinely.
No, I understand. And would you say that you knew of the existence of those Excel spreadsheets with their colour coding in them by June 2014, which was the date of the spreadsheet I showed you?
I can't remember.
Right. Can we look then again at what you asked at the Health and Safety Operational Meeting on the 20th of June 2014 at TMO 1000974. TMO 1009784. We looked at this yesterday together, Mr. Maddison. I'd like to go to page 2 in that minute under FRA statistics, and you can see in the second paragraph that you said PM asked JW to clarify which of the actions could be defined as absolute requirements and which were best practice. JW to clarify how many of the actions are reds, priorities. I asked you about that yesterday, and let me show you what you said. Day 122, please, at page 200. I just want to look and see what you said yesterday. At line 18, I asked you the question, why did you need clarification about what actions were reds? And you said at line 20, I think I was looking, it sounds like I'm looking to prioritise the work so we can make as much headway as we possibly can here. Question, surely this was just a matter of looking at the FRA itself and seeing the colour. Answer, I was, and if we turn the page, looking for a summary so I could manage, rather than delving into the detail of every fire risk assessment, I was looking for some higher level information that I could help manage my team and my process. Now, given that by 20th of June 2014, you had seen first the 27th of February 2013 Word document, which showed the colour coding prioritisations, and secondly, you knew of the existence at least, and had seen examples of the Excel spreadsheet, which also had red, amber, and green prioritisation levels in it. The question is, what clarification did you need about what actions could be defined as absolute requirements and what best practice?
As I said yesterday, I don't understand the minute. I don't understand that question.
Because you'd already had enough information, or knew you could get enough information from your team or from Janice Ray, which would set out precisely the colour coding.
Yes.
Yes.
And perhaps, but I can speculate that I don't know what information we were reviewing at that meeting, but maybe what I was asking for was a breakdown of the age bands by the colour coding as a summary level, so you could understand by how many actions were read that were in date or out of date. But I don't remember the context of that conversation or that minute.
Right. My suggestion to you is that given that you had the information about the priorities, that you were in fact seeking to reprioritise or sub-prioritise the actions so that you could get on top of the most urgent ones.
I'd certainly not reprioritise. I think it was about working out how we could reduce the backlog that there clearly was, as quickly and effectively as possible.
Can we go to TMO 100?
Can I just ask, is it possible that you think that you were trying to identify which of the reds were, if I can put it in this term, the reddest?
Possibly.
Well, can you remember?
I can't remember. I'm afraid I can't remember this conversation at all. I can't remember the meeting. So I just have no recollection of it. Right. But I think that, I think that what you're suggesting might be what I was doing, or trying to find out how we could make the most progress most effectively.
All right. Thank you.
Right. Can we please go to TMO 10043024? Now, this is another example of an Excel spreadsheet, this time an Excel spreadsheet which appears from its file name to be dated the 16th of February 2015, so some 7 days or so before the 20th of February 2015 meeting we looked at yesterday afternoon. Is this generated from W2, do you think?
I think so, but I can't be sure.
Do you recognise it as an example of the spreadsheets that Janice Ray would have emailed, at least to your team, if not to you directly?
Yes, I think it is.
Can we look at column N, please? Under which you can see the heading team and various descriptions of that down the page. A&R project management. That's one of your teams, isn't it?
It is.
Does that tell us that you would have seen this spreadsheet?
No.
And who within your team would have received that?
So the project management team. So the project management team would be David Gibson's team.
If we look down to item 18, we can see there that we're dealing here with Grenfell Tower, A&R project management, Claire Williams, and same under the next item down, also Claire Williams, because it's Grenfell. Would you have seen it because it was Grenfell related specifically?
No.
It was a project within your portfolio, after all.
All of the actions in this would be under my portfolio.
Can we look at column I, please? Column I sets out the priority there, and red is high. Do you agree that that shows the nature of each outstanding item in risk terms?
Yes.
And also the priority levels for each action? Yes?
Yes.
And just, you can note that one of those is for Grenfell Tower.
Yes.
High, yes. Now go back, if we can please, to TMO 0086947. This is the minute of the Health and Safety operational meeting of the 23rd of February 2015 we looked at yesterday together. Can we go to the foot of page 1? That's TMO 00869 479. Thank you. And if we go to the bottom of page 1, again, FRA stats, and at the very foot of the page, you see that you are recorded as saying, PM suggested that it would be useful to have more information in relation to the priority levels and nature of each outstanding FRA. PM and JW to discuss at a later stage. JW confirmed that the team are managing and prioritising the FRAs and that there will be always some outstanding FRAs due to the nature of the assessments. JW to split the outstanding FRAs into high, medium and low categories with targets. Now, we looked yesterday together about that, and let me just show you what you said there. Can we go to the transcript for yesterday, please? At page 206. That's day 122 at page 206. Picking it up at line 16, my question at line 17 is, by this stage, did you not have a document, whether it was the original FRAs or whether it was a spreadsheet which reflected the priorities accorded to the actions by the fire risk assessor? And you say, it would appear not, because that's what I'm asking for. I mean, obviously there would be the fire risk assessment report itself available, but that is, there are 10,000 properties, and that's a lot of work. I was, over the page, looking for something which would give an overview that would help me steer and direct the compliance in this field. It's right, it appears now, doesn't it, that by the time of the meeting on the 23rd of February 2015, that there were available to you from your team documents or spreadsheets which showed you how many actions were marked red, which actions were high, medium or low, and with a significant amount of detail in them.
To my team, yes. So the heads of service had a report that detailed the specific actions that were required in their team. What I think I was asking for at this stage was an overview, a summary overview of that. So by team, how many actions are there, by age and by priority. I think that's what I was looking for. But
you were asking for more information in relation to the priority levels. Why didn't you simply ask Janice Ray to have the document or in the Word form that you'd received on the 4th of March 2013 at the very start of the process, which did set out the traffic light system in relation to each outstanding FRA item?
I think the traffic light system was clear. I think that what I was after here was something that was a bit more of a dashboard indicator as to how the direction of progress that was happening here.
Well, the note says that you're after more information in relation to the priority levels and nature of each outstanding FRA. What were you after that the Word document I showed you, that you got on the 4th of March 2013, didn't give you?
I think I was after a summary of by age and by priority, an overview summary as a dashboard indicator.
But why couldn't you use the Word document that you'd received?
I hadn't received that Word document because that went to the heads of service.
No, we've seen that you did receive it, Mr.
Okay, so, well, I only saw an extract. Was that for all of the actions for the whole?
Well, it was an extract. It was an extract for surveying. That is certainly the case. But you knew that had come to you. You must have realised there were others available in respect of other areas under your management. Why not simply say to Janice Ray, well, please can I have a file full or even a sample of the Word documents you sent me in March last year, 2 years ago?
I don't know. I mean, it was clear that there was information there. I was just looking for a summary that would be useful for my purposes.
We've seen the Word document. We've seen the Excel spreadsheets that by June 2014 you knew were available at least to your team, even if they weren't coming to you directly. Why not simply ask your team to use those documents to produce a summary of the outstanding items by reference to priority?
I could have done that, but I'd asked Janice to do this.
Why?
Because she was managing the data. So I thought if she could give me a summary, then that would be helpful to give me clarity on the priorities and the actions required.
Why was it necessary to have Janice Ray split outstanding FRAs into high, medium and low categories with targets, given that that is what her work and her team's work over the last 2 years had already done?
It had done that on the whole borough, whole organisation basis, and have done that by team, which was provided to the heads of service. But
Yes,
I wanted a higher level report, that's all.
Well, she'd also done it in relation to your specific teams, because your teams and you on occasions had had extracts. So
And a valid response from Janice might have been to say, go away and do it yourself, these are the spreadsheets. But I don't remember what the outcome of this dialogue was. But I was just asking for some clarification at a high level.
Were you asking for clarification, or were you just asking for a form of document, a different form of document?
I was asking for a summary. I was asking for a summary of the work that was required at a high level so that I could have a view as to whether things were progressing in the way that they ought to, and where my team, and to ensure that my team were doing what they needed to do with the granular detail.
So, just to understand your evidence, are you asking for just a different format for presenting information that you knew you already had about priorities, or are you actually asking for a fresh analysis about which outstanding FRAs should be divided into high, those into medium and those into low categories?
I'm not asking for a reprioritisation. I'm asking for a summary of the current actions by priority and by timescale.
Doesn't quite answer my question. Were you after a different format for presenting information that you already had or could get, or were you asking for a new analysis of the prioritisation?
Sorry, I'm not sure I understand that question.
Well, there's a difference, isn't there, between asking for a different format in which to have information presented to you on the one hand, and on the other, a new analysis of the underlying information. Do you understand that distinction?
No, sorry,
You
I'm a bit confused here.
Were you after, let me try one more time, were you after a new document setting out information in a different way, that being information you already had, or were you after a fresh analysis of priorities?
No, I was asking for a summary of all of the data, a high-level summary, so I could see by age band and by priority.
Mr. Maddison, that answer, I'm afraid, blurs the distinction that I'm trying to draw with you.
I'm sorry, I'm not understanding what the distinction is you're asking me to. Could you rephrase the question, perhaps?
Well, I have done. I've rephrased it 3 to 4 times. I'm not going to try again, I think. Can I just suggest to you that what you were actually asking for was a reprioritisation, because you already had the prioritisation in the documents that you either had seen or were available to you.
No, I specifically was not asking for categories to be reprioritised. I specifically was not asking for that. I was asking for a summary of the actions that were prioritised by colour, code and by age profile.
If that is the case, can we go back to the minute then at TMO 00869 479 and go back to the foot of page 1, top of page 2 again. Let's keep it at the top of page 2. If all you were after was a summary, a high-level summary of existing information, could you please explain to us why you were asking for, this is foot of page 1, I'm sorry, more information in relation to the priority levels and the nature of each outstanding FRA? On the face of it, that doesn't look like a request for a summary of existing information. It looks like a request for more detailed information. Do you accept that?
Sorry, can I see the bottom of the previous page?
Yes, PM suggested that it would be useful to have more information in relation to the priority over the page, levels, and nature of each outstanding FRA. And then, at the end of that, you can see in bold, JW to split out. Now, the first of those is not a request for a summary, is it? It's a request for more information and detail about the nature of each outstanding FRA. That's not a request for a summary.
Well, the detail and nature is the age that I was looking for, is the age profile and the priority by colour code.
Yes, it's not a summary, though, is it? You want more information, not less.
I don't think that's the case.
Right. And I suggest again that the reality here is that you were actually unable to get on top of the compliance problems in the timescale set out in each FRA, and for that reason you wanted to, or trying to, alter the priority levels and have them redone.
No, that's categorically not right.
Right. Now, let's go to the minutes of the Operational Health and Safety Group meeting on the 31st of July 2015. This is at TMO 1009039. You were present, as you can see, Mr. Maddison. Let's look at page 4, paragraph 3.1, under fire risk assessments. Still looking at about 45% of actions not progressed, have been working with RD to improve this. And then it goes on, RD have reviewed all of the FRAs and health and safety actions, currently waiting for RD to programme that work, and will then raise the orders for the blocks. BM asked to see the key things and the timing for it. PM asked for a breakdown by priority and age to make it clear where the risks are. There needs to be an ongoing breakdown of the list. PM suggested a meeting to discuss interface between RD and AB's team, CM to organise meeting, etc. Now, would you agree that 45% of FRA actions was a very substantial proportion?
Yes.
Do you know why 45% of FRA actions were still outstanding at that point? This is July 2015.
The next part is that you've been working with RD, Repairs Direct, to improve this, so this wasn't in my area of the service. So I can't comment on that.
Are you saying that the entirety of the 45% was down to RD, or none?
I don't have details of the figures that we were looking at, or the specifics. It's up behind that minute, but that seems to be talking about actions with Repairs Direct.
Right, but you're reading this off the minute. You're not telling me what you're telling me from an independent recollection. Is that right?
I don't remember the specifics of this meeting now.
In general, can you help us? Did this 45% of actions not progressed relate to the 2014 FRAs or earlier FRAs?
I don't know.
You don't know. Can we go, please, a little bit? Yes, can we look at paragraph 3.2, which I've read to you? We can see in the third line, BM asked to see the key things and the timing for it. PM asked for a breakdown by priority and age to make it clear where the risks are. I've read that to you. There needs to be an ongoing breakdown of the list. Now, this instance, 31st of July 2015, appears to be the third time when you had sought further clarification about Janice Ray's reports on outstanding FRA actions, because we've seen it before repeatedly. By this time, had you not seen breakdown by priority and age?
I can't remember whether I had. I probably had. There may have been I certainly would be having conversations with Janice and with my heads of service, and maybe I'd find a different way of looking at the data with my team to make sure that things are being progressed. So the fact that that I'm asking for information doesn't mean that things haven't been progressed or reviewed in the meantime.
No. Looking back then at the history, we've seen that the master list was going to be produced, and indeed was produced in late February, early March. We saw an extract from that. We saw you asking for a prioritisation in June 2014. We've seen you asking for the same again, effectively, in February 2015, and now we're at July 2015. Can you explain why it was that you were still asking for a breakdown by priority and age to make it clear where the risks are?
I think it's clear that it isn't a standard report that comes to meetings, and I think from my perspective it probably would have been a useful part of the dashboard that the team was looking at. However, there was the detail information being communicated to my teams, and my teams were actioning and communicating back to Janice Ray's team on those completions. And there would be dialogue going on between the various parties in between these meetings. These were very much summary meetings. I did feel that high-level breakdown would have helped clarity and transparency about what was happening. But that's not to say that the information that was flowing wasn't useful in its own right.
Right. What prompted you to ask for a breakdown by priority and age?
At this distance, without remembering the full context of what was happening at this particular time and seeing the information that was being reviewed at this meeting, I really have no recollection.
I see.
But in general, the way I would look at it would be to try, I would be looking for an overall summary so that I can understand the performance and the trends and to establish where I needed to intervene and take action if necessary.
Can you help to this extent? Was this a new request for something different that you hadn't asked for before, or was this to stay a further instance of you asking for a breakdown of outstanding FRA actions by priority and age?
I don't recall.
Right. Barbara Matthews, BM, she was responsible, was she, by this time, for FRA actions, yes?
She was the executive team responsible for health and safety, including fire risk assessment, yes.
Right. And why are you taking responsibility or asking about that at this stage?
I think I'm trying to understand the current situation and understand what actions are required.
At this point, had there actually been any focus on a breakdown by priority?
I don't recall.
Or age?
Certainly by age. I think there was I've seen minutes of Health and Safety Committee meetings where a summary report of outstanding actions by age is reported on a regular basis.
When you said, or when the minute records you as saying that you needed to make it clear where the risks are, what were the risks that you had in mind?
Well, the risk of non-compliance, and so the risk of ensuring actions are completed within time,
right?
And where there's a risk that won't be completed in time, and whether there's anything we can do to address that.
Can we look, please, at TMO 1009652? This is a document entitled FRA Outstanding Actions for W2 Workflow between 1st August 13 and 28th July 15. If at the bottom of the screen you can see that it says numbers in brackets show position on 10th June 2015. Do you remember this document being presented to the meeting of the Operational Health and Safety Committee on the 31st of July, the minutes of which we've just been looking at?
I don't remember it specifically now, but it might have been the sort of information that would be presented.
Right. Let's just scroll gently down it to see if it triggers a recollection. We can see there on page 2, breakdown of FRA actions by team. And there are the teams, A&R contract management, project management. Those are yours, aren't they?
Yes.
And you can see the figures. Total, fully complete, partially complete, outstanding. And then to page 3, we just look at the final page there, breakdown of neighbourhood management, FRA actions. And there are the locations. Lancaster West is the third, out of interest. And we can see that there were none outstanding, at least there. Given that that information, well, let me put it to you this way: do you actually have a specific recollection of this information being presented at that meeting?
No.
Is this the kind of information that you recall in general was presented at meetings such as these at that time?
Yes.
Yes. Given that this sort of information was presented at these sorts of meetings at that time, why did you ask for a breakdown by priority and age to make it clear where the risks were? Did this document not give you enough information on that?
No, I don't think it did. So
why not?
Could we go back to the page which has got my teams on it?
Yes, go back to page 2, please.
So from that, it doesn't give a breakdown by age. So those complete and outstanding those outstanding may all be in timescale, for example, and I assume that they weren't. But if they were all in timescale, then things may be not a problem.
Right.
Whereas actually, if you see it by priority and by whether they're in timescale or out of timescale, then that gives a clear indication as to whether things are working and what action needs to be taken to address it.
Now, by this point, of course, you knew, I suggest to you, that documents did exist showing the traffic light system and the age, the aged outstandings. Why wasn't it as simple as putting that document or those documents with this document and synthesizing them?
I agree. So, but it would for a dashboard, this isn't very helpful to me because it doesn't tell me whether we're on target or whether we're not.
Right.
So really what I felt would be more useful was to develop this into something that gave me a clearer dashboard of what was in priority, what wasn't, and so we could direct the actions accordingly.
Do you remember when this kind of document started being produced and presented to the Operational Health and Safety Committee?
I don't, but I seem to remember that the operation. Well, I don't know that it was the Operational Health and Safety Committee, but certainly when Barbara Matthews reinvigorated the Corporate Health and Safety Committee, that was where the focus of this sort of information came, and the level of detail developed going forward.
It did, and we'll come to that shortly, later in the year. Did you get an immediate answer to your request for a breakdown by priority and age?
I don't remember.
Right. Can we go then to TMO 100444175? This is a TMO Health and Safety Committee meeting, and this is the minute of it on the 29th of September 2015, and you can see that you were present. This appears to be your first recorded attendance at a TMO Health and Safety Committee meeting, properly so called, as opposed to the Operations Committee. Is that right?
I don't remember, but certainly Barbara Matthews gave a new focus to this meeting, and my team, my heads of service, would normally have attended this meeting previously, but Barbara brought a new focus to it, and I was much more engaged in these meetings.
Why had you not attended a Health and Safety Committee meeting before September 2015?
Before that, I'd been attending the Departmental Health and Safety Committee, but this was and my heads of service would be attending this corporate meeting. But going forward with a new focus, I attended these meetings with Barbara chairing.
Was your role on the TMO Health and Safety Committee different in any way from your role at the Operational Health and Safety meetings that we'd seen before?
No, not really.
If we go down, please, to page 2, we can see paragraph 3.1 of the minutes at the foot of that page. Fire safety and risk assessment. And then we see it says there have been an additional 200 completed actions since July. PM added that the age profile needs to be monitored carefully going forward. What prompted you to raise that point? Do you remember?
That a key part of this was about priorities and making sure that actions were completed within their age profile, within their timescale. So this was about me focusing on the actions that need to be done within those timescales.
Were you suggesting that FRA actions were taking too long to be closed down?
Certainly, I was flagging up that we needed to be aware of the risk of not closing them down effectively, because that would mean that we wouldn't be complying with the priorities in the FRA.
And when you refer to age profile, did you think that the age profile was being too generous?
No, I was keen to ensure that actions were completed within the priority timescales.
So when it says the age profile needs to be monitored carefully, was that suggesting that each outstanding FRA action had to be monitored to ensure that it was completed within the existing timeframe?
Within the allocated timeframe within the FRA, yes.
Yes. By whom did you expect the age profile to be monitored?
The overall programme management monitoring would be with Janice Ray and the Health and Safety team. So she had the overview, she allocated the actions to teams and recorded them as being complete when they were complete. And also, so she had an overview of the programme, and the individual heads of service would be responsible for ensuring the actions that were within their team were completed within the targets.
And how are they being monitored up to that point?
I assume on the same basis.
I see. So you were asking that the same people monitor more carefully than they had been?
I don't know if I would put it that way, but I mean, I was emphasising that we need to ensure that the progress in reducing the number of actions continued, and we need to make sure that actions weren't slipping out of priority.
Yes. I mean, on the face of it, your addition that the age profile needs to be monitored carefully going forward, it carries an implicit criticism. Do you accept that up to that point it hadn't been monitored as carefully as you thought was appropriate?
Yes.
Yeah. Can we go to TMO 1001066, please? This is the paper 2 circulated for that meeting. Can we look at the first page of paper 2? Item 1, FRA outstanding actions for W2 workflow between 1st August 13 and 28th September 2015. So this is a development of the document we saw at the end of July. And it covers, as you can see, a 2-year period. In the outstanding row, it looks as if there are 812 outstanding actions as at the 28th of September 2015. Yes?
Yes.
And there had been 814 as at the 28th of July 2015. Yes?
Yeah.
And if we add in the 109 partially completed as at the 28th of September 2015, that meant that there were 921 outstanding actions that needed to be completed.
Yeah.
So is this right, that in the period of 26 months, some 40% remained outstanding? Just as a matter of arithmetic.
It would appear so, yes.
Yes. This document doesn't indicate how long those 921 had been incomplete for or outstanding for, does it?
No.
So does this tell us that you still didn't have your synthesis document, which identified priority and length of period outstanding by this time?
Unless it's detailed later in this report, but I don't recall.
Nor does it tell you what the category of risk that those incompleted actions posed.
No.
It's not in this report. No. Can we look at the next page then, please? Which is breakdown of FRA actions by team. You can see in the left-hand column, again, and it's the same format as the one we saw from July, A&R contract management and AR project management, your teams, those were the teams with the most outstanding actions, yes?
Sorry, which teams did you say?
Well, let me just be a bit clearer. If you look at A&R contract management,
yes,
the first team, you've got an outstanding set of 393 against a total of 649.
Yes.
And if you look also at responsive repairs, you've got 287 over 476. But I think you say that responsive repairs isn't in your team.
That's correct.
And our project management is, yes?
Yes.
And you've got 13 outstanding over 67. Again, we can't tell from that page the age profile of those actions, or indeed anywhere else in the document. Let's go to the fourth page and look at the contract management team specifically. Page 4. This is at the foot of the page, contract management team outstanding action breakdown. Here we do have high priority, target 21 days, 327. So it's not in the overall figures at the top, but we do find it buried away here on page 4. So it looks as if of the outstanding actions, 393, 327 were A&R contract management. Now, did you have any input into creating this part of this paper?
No.
Do you know who did?
I assume it was the health and safety team.
I see. Did you receive this document before this meeting?
I assume it would have been circulated before the
Do you
meeting.
know who presented this document to that meeting?
It would have been Janice Ray.
Janice Ray. Now, you can see across the page there, high priority, target 21 days, medium 60 days, low 180 days, info only, no time frames, that's no colour. Do you know who it was who determined those priorities or time frames when compiling this document?
I'm assuming that this information is pulled directly from the FRA and from the summary documents, so that would be Janice. So I think Janice Ray would have produced this document.
Did you have any discussion with Janice Ray before she produced this document?
I think this is the level of detail I've been asking for.
Right, but now, did you have any discussion with Janice Ray when she was producing this document so that she would be satisfied, that you were satisfied, that you were now at last getting the information that you'd been asking for?
Not specifically, no.
Right.
But I think it had been discussed at Health and Safety Committee, at the Corporate Health and Safety Committee meetings.
Right. You still can't, I think, see which particular actions have particular outstanding actions have particular longevity, can you?
No, well, no, it doesn't. It doesn't. But it gives a summary by priority, and so in tandem with that, if we had an age profile of each, that would be the information I was after.
Yeah. Were you aware of the consequential risk to residents if, for example, high priority actions were not completed within the 21-day period?
Yes.
Or what, if anything, what would happen if high priority actions were not completed within the set timeframes?
Yes, and it's broader than that too, because it's not just about the fire risk assessment is a process of checking, but there's a whole broader piece in terms of all the compliance of all of the assets in the borough, and that was where our focus was trying to ensure that there was broad compliance across the whole stock.
Yeah.
And the fire risk assessment was a checking process on that as well.
And we see, if we go to page 5 and page 6, we could probably put those side by side, actually. If we put those side by side, you can see that there is a breakdown of outstanding FRA actions, but with annual dates, with months in them.
Okay.
So you need to look into that and put those together. Now, this relates only to contract management actions, doesn't it? Not all FRAs.
No.
And when you said that the age profile needs to be monitored going forward, did you mean all actions or only those with which you were concerned in your teams?
My priority was what was happening in my team.
Right. So what about the rest?
Sorry.
What about the rest? What about the other teams?
So the other teams, so the same principle would apply. So Barbara Matthews had the overview and managed this through the corporate health and safety team. All teams were represented at that meeting, and performance of each team was reported at a summary level, and those heads of service and directors would be responsible for their areas as well. I mean, obviously there were some areas of crossover between teams, and that was something that was discussed at these meetings.
Right. Did you see any breakdown of outstanding FRA actions in relation to anything other than contract management?
I don't recall.
Right. Do you know whether they existed?
I don't.
Let's go back to the minutes of the meeting, please. TMO 00444175. You can see on page 3, if we go to page 3 in that document, please, we can see on that page, paragraph 3.2 at the top, AB has been going through the list of actions and allocating them to the appropriate contractor. PM confirmed that the data will be cleansed in a meeting tomorrow. PM also met with JW to discuss streamlining the process. JW anxious to get as many of the actions completed as possible in advance of the imminent health and safety audit. PM confirmed all actions to be completed by end of November. What did you mean there, that the data will be cleansed?
I think that what emerged as we started to get greater clarity of what data was available was that there was some old data in there, things that had been actioned that hadn't been closed down effectively, and it was about understanding what the true position was. And so it was about making sure that we made sure that everything was up to date and clear and correct. Could you just remind me of the date of this meeting?
Yeah, this is the 29th of September 2015. So what would be cleansed, and what would be removed by way of cleansing? Can we be clear?
I can't remember the detail of the conversation, but I think it was just making sure that actions that were closed, or things that weren't relevant. It wasn't about closing things that hadn't been completed. It was certainly about making sure that the information that we had was correct.
Yeah, the word cleansed doesn't really give the impression of ensuring correct. It rather gives the impression that it would be manipulated in some way so as to omit things that somebody perhaps didn't want somebody else to see.
I don't agree.
You don't agree? Now, we know that there was an imminent health and safety audit. Was this cleansing in view of this imminent audit?
It certainly gave a focus to it, but a new set of information had a new level of clarity of information was being presented here, and there appeared to be some actions in there that needed to be resolved. So I think that's what it's saying.
Yeah.
It was about separating out what. So for example, removing assets that were no longer to be serviced, for example, or in making sure that things were addressed.
The suggestion is here that you would meet with Janice Ray to discuss streamlining the process. Did you meet her with that purpose in mind?
Well, streamlining the process was, I think, my recollection of that conversation was that a large number of the actions that were allocated to the contracts management team in particular were to investigate or was to consider rather than to do. So I felt that the wording of the FRAs needs to be more precise and specific so that we can actually action them and turn them instantly into a form of words for a works order rather than sending one of my team to go and investigate, particularly if that's something that isn't in their area of expertise, because that was what I understood the fire risk assessor's expertise was in. So I think that was about that process. In addition to that, I felt that some of the actions would come to say things like confirm that this item has been serviced, whereas actually we had records that could be viewed before visiting site, and rather than create an action and a bureaucracy, having the fire risk assessor check some of those actions before going on the site and making the action unnecessary. So it was about trying to streamline the process so we didn't end up with a backlog of actions.
Now, your notes for that meeting are at TMO 00879-772 at page 34. Shall we look at those together? we can see, this is from your daybook number 7, in the top right-hand corner, you can see it says H&S Committee, 29th September 15, and then in the second line, update for next meeting, proposal or proposed for alternative approach to FRAs. You see that?
Yes.
And then underneath that it says, tell me if this is wrong, Mr. Maddison, specific actions raised as jobs, not as W2 actions. Have I read that right?
Yes.
What did you mean by an alternative approach to FRAs?
I felt that we could streamline the process as described in the minutes. I felt that one of the ways we could have done that, so one of them was the issue I've just raised about specific actions. So rather than go and investigate this issue, go and do this work. That's what I wanted. I wanted the language of the fire risk assessments to be more precise, because they were the fire risk assessor is the expert here. And I thought that rather than create actions through a W2 process, we could just issue jobs. So rather than allocate a task to a team to raise a job, why not just raise the job and streamline that process? So that was I was looking at ways in which we could remove some of the bureaucracy and improve the efficiency of progressing these actions.
So to be clear, were you suggesting that the FRAs, the fire risk assessors, would write a different kind of report which would identify not only what the risks are and the priorities, but also identify with precision the cure?
Where possible, I think that, yes, because some of the actions would be to, for example, to check that this is a fire door, for example, whereas actually the fire risk assessor is there at the door. Why not check and confirm it's a fire door? So rather than give an action to another team member who's then got to go and carry out that assessment, why not do it there and then? That was the kind of streamlining that I was looking at.
Did you have any discussions with any of TMO's fire risk assessors about that proposal?
Ultimately, I did. I mean, initially I spoke to Janice and spoke to my team, because it was really about, this was about clarity of information. And so there was a dialogue going on between my contracts management team and Janice about that issue. I think there was a meeting, and I only met Carl Stokes maybe 2 or 3 times in my time at the TMO. But I do remember there being a meeting to try and resolve some of these issues and make the process more focused and streamlined.
Now, we've seen reference in the minute to an imminent health and safety audit that was to take place. I showed you that in paragraph 3.2 on page 3. That was an audit, wasn't it, carried out by RBKC?
I assume so, yes.
Do you know?
I don't.
You don't. Well, let's just look at the audit report. It's at RBK 50531, please. It's dated March 2016. It's the final internal audit report on health and safety. Just looking at its first page, did you see this document at the time, do you think?
I don't recall.
You don't recall. Were you aware, in general, of the gist of the findings in this report?
No.
No.
Not from memory.
So can we take it that you didn't see it and didn't read it?
I don't think I saw it. I wouldn't necessarily have seen it.
Right. Let me see if I can just show you something that might trigger a recollection. Can we go to page 4, please? And on page 4, you can see the summary of findings. And at the top of the page, under executive summary, paragraph 2.1, assurance opinion, audit opinion, and you get a substantial assurance. Did you you know, were you aware that that was the outcome of the audit?
Yes, I heard that, but don't think I saw this report.
Right. Did you see it in draft, do you think?
No.
Right. Can we look at RBK 50313, please? Is this a document you've seen before? The reason I ask you is that you'll see that you're on the circulation list.
Yes, I don't remember the exact report.
Right. We can see you're on the circulation list. Do you remember receiving it?
I don't.
You don't. Right. Let's look anyway to see. Well, let's look at the final version. Perhaps it's the best to see what it says about FRAs. Can we go back, please, to the previous document, RBK 50531, at page 6. And at page 6, you can see there at the very foot of the page, last bullet point, over to page 7, it says this: the fire risk assessments, FRA, are carried out by a third-party specialist consultant, and the FRA reviews are undertaken by the TMO Assistant Safety Advisor during routine inspections of properties to ensure that any significant findings and action plan items identified by the FRA are progressed in a timely manner as per their stated priority. Checks on Keystone for 10 estates confirmed these were up to date and all fire equipment had been inspected within the past 12-month period. Now, this is March 2016. The impression given by this audit and what I particularly read to you just now was that FRA actions were progressed in a timely manner. Was that really true, given the significant backlog that we've seen, at least as at end of September 2015?
I think things were progressing at speed here, really. I think that 2016. So certainly, a lot of the challenges had been around the procurement and the delivery. Certainly in my area, were around the servicing contracts and getting them into place. In Keystone was taken in an enormous amount of focus and effort, and it was through that really we felt that that's how it was the route to achieving significant compliance rather than reactive compliance, which I think had been the case before. So I think that focus had been on ensuring that those contracts were delivering, and I think by this stage they were, and I think we were seeing the benefits of that.
Did you have any meetings with the RBKC auditors on the subject of FRA actions?
Not specifically FRA actions. I mean, the auditors had audited each of the contracts and the contract areas that we had procured, and each of them had been given substantial assurance, and that was done by ensuring that we were looking at live data on our Keystone system and having a much greater level of scrutiny on that. The fire risk assessment aspect of this had been recently procured at around about this time. So there was a new contractor who was mobilising around about 2016.
Yeah, but the audit, of course, had started in or around late September, early October 2015, which is why it was described in the minute we've just seen as imminent. Is that right?
I didn't know if this was the same audit. I don't think I had any direct involvement in the audit. I didn't meet the auditors.
Right. Well, I was going to ask you, during the period between the end of September 2015 and the publication of the final report, did you have any involvement in providing the auditors with the sort of information that we've seen in paper 2, which identified the outstanding actions and their proportion to the total and the prioritisation?
I didn't have any involvement in the audit at all. I didn't meet the auditors.
Right. Are you able to explain, say, whether the auditors saw documents such as those that we had seen presented to the 29th of September Health and Safety Committee meeting?
I had no involvement in the audit at all.
Let's go back a little bit in time then. Health and Safety Committee meeting, 24th of November 2015 at TMO 100-11452. Mr. Chairman, I'm just noting the time. If I can finish this document,
Yes, all right, carry on.
we'll just cover this one. This is another Health and Safety Committee meeting. Now you're there, as you can see, 24th November 15. Can we go to page 4, please? Look at item 5.6 on that page. How do we check actions deriving from deficiency notices are done and monitor how they are escalated if not done within the timeframes? JW will be monitoring the actions. Depending on what the issue is, JW will escalate where necessary through the relevant managers. PM would like this in a formal written process. Deficiency notices to be reported at this meeting. Now, we can see that the discussion concerned notification of deficiency notices. Those issued by the LFB.
Sorry, I didn't catch that.
Deficiency notices, were those notices
I assume so,
issued by the
yes.
LFB?
Yes.
Yeah. Do you know why this discussion was being held only now? How did this come up?
I don't remember.
What was your understanding at the time of the monitoring process in place so far as regards deficiencies notified by the LFB?
I didn't know that there was a process in place.
Is it true also the other way around that you knew that there was no process in place?
No, I didn't know.
We didn't know one way or the other?
I didn't know whether there was a process or not.
Right. You say in the minute that you would like this in a formal written process. What was it specifically that you wanted recorded in or as part of a formal written process?
I mean, if there was a deficiency notice issued, that it was communicated to the correct people in the organisation, because there was a risk that significant parties may not learn of it unless there's a clear protocol.
Right. Does that indicate to us that you realised that there wasn't such a formal written process at the time? Otherwise, you wouldn't have asked for one.
I don't remember this conversation, but this minute would suggest that that was the case.
Indeed. Do you know whether a formal written process for actions arising from LFB notices of deficiencies was ever implemented?
I don't remember.
Now, the minute records that deficiency notices were to be recorded or reported at that meeting, in other words, the Health and Safety Committee meeting or meetings. Were they to be reported at any other meetings?
I don't know.
Other groups? No. And who within the TMO, to your understanding, would be told if a deficiency notice had been received from the LFB?
I don't know, but I would assume it would go to the company secretary or to the chief executive.
Right. Mr. Chairman, we're going to continue in this line as is now becoming habitual, but this may be an appropriate moment for a break. We're going to go to another document.
If it's not too inconvenient,
not.
as far as you're concerned, yes.
It's not.
Mr. Maddison, I think it is time we had a short break. Usual routine, please. Don't talk to anyone about your evidence, please, while you're out of the room.
Okay.
We'll resume at 25 to 12, please. All right, thank you very much. Thank you. 25 to 12, please. Thank you. Would you ask Mr. Maddison to come back in, please? Thank you. All right, ready to continue, Mr. Maddison?
Yes.
Thank you very much. Yes, Mr. Willett.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Maddison, can I next go, please, with you to TMO 008 40480? Now, this is a document entitled KCTMO Procedure for Dealing with LFB Deficiency Notices, and it's paper 3, which would indicate that it was circulated to a meeting. And you can see from the foot of the page, if we scroll down to it, please, that it's dated January 2016 and signed off by Janice Ray. Have you seen this document before?
I don't remember it, but I would have, if it's been circulated as part of the pack for the Operations Committee meetings, I'm sure I would have seen it.
Right. Do you remember whether this was the procedure or process produced by the TMO to ensure actions from deficiency notices were completed and escalated?
I don't remember it, but it looks like that.
Right. Do you remember how it was formalised?
I don't.
You don't?
I'm presuming it'll be on the record.
Right. Do you remember ever asking Janice Ray why in this document there's no mention of the W2 monitoring of deficiency notice actions that had been the subject of discussion at the meeting we just looked at?
I don't remember that, but possibly by this time W2 had been replaced by a different system. So there was a CRM system that effectively replaced W2.
Right. Summarising what Ms. Ray says in her supplemental witness statement, paragraph 36, and that's and I'll just give the reference, it's TMO 008733934 at page 18. There's no need to go to it. She says that there was no specific workflow on W2 or CRM for deficiency notices. Do you remember that?
I don't.
You don't? Were you aware at the time that W2 was not used in order to monitor deficiency notices?
I think I think W2 had probably been replaced by the CRM system.
Right. Do you know when that was?
I don't.
You don't?
But
You
I wasn't aware of a process for signing off deficiency notice actions. I think this was more about communicating the deficiency notices.
Are you able to tell us how completion of actions was going to be monitored if it wasn't on WT or CRM, as far as the deficiency notices are concerned?
I don't, but my assumption would be that any communication would have been through the CRM system anyway.
Do you remember what reports the Health and Safety Committee received from the time you were on it about the completion or otherwise of actions identified in LFB deficiency notices?
I don't remember.
Can we go back to the minute of the Health and Safety Committee meeting of the 29th of September 2015 at TMO 100111191? I'm sorry, that's the wrong reference, but because we don't need to go to it. Can I? Well, let's go to that. Sorry, let's go to the 29th of September meeting. Forgive me. It's at TMO 100-44175. Yes, and I just want to show you something in that, if I can. If you go, please, to page 3. We saw this before. It's 3.2 at the top of page 3. In the last sentence, you confirmed that all actions would be completed by the end of November. You see that? Yes?
Yes.
Now, if we then go back, please, to the FRA statistics which were produced for the November meeting, this is at TMO 100111191. It's the reference I gave a minute ago. And if we look at that, this is paper 2 for the 24th of November 2015 meeting, showing data as it stood at the previous day, with numbers in brackets as at the 28th of September 2015. Would you agree that this table suggests that although there has been some reduction for A&R contract management, I think we'll need to see the next page, page 2. You could see A&R contract management. Although there's been some reduction from 393 down to 285 outstanding items, as you can see in the right-hand column, A&R project management has still got 13 actions outstanding as at the 29th of September, which was still outstanding as at the 23rd of November.
Sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes. Although there's been some reduction for A&R contract management, as you can see, from 393 as at the end of September down to 285, that's the different figures in the outstandings column. Yes?
Yes.
You've still got you've still got 13 or so actions outstanding as at the 29th of September, which was still outstanding as at the 23rd of November.
So the 13 refers to the project management team. There's the 285 refers to the contract management team.
Yes.
So
you're quite right. It does.
So if I understand what you're asking is, do I recognise that there's been a reduction in the FRA actions within the contract management team from 393 down to 285?
Yes.
I do recognise.
And you've got my point is, you've got no movement although you've got some movement in the contract management team, you've got no movement in the project management.
Right. Okay. So the likelihood on that, I don't know the specifics of those actions, but any actions within the project management team are likely to be being procured in the capital programme. So it's quite often there'll be a longer lead in on those. So it might be that it's waiting for scaffold to be erected as part of the work. So it might not be uncommon that those projects there may be low priority issues, but waiting for access arrangements or something like that. And I suspect that those are one of those.
Did you explore that? You say you suspect. Is that something you actually intend?
It will have been part of the discussion I've been having with my teams about understanding what the issues are in terms of those outstanding actions, yes.
It's clear at any event that although some progress had been made, as we can see, you weren't going to meet the deadline of the end of November for clearing all actions, were you?
No.
No. Was that disappointing to you?
Yes.
Were there any consequences for your team missing that deadline?
Well, what I discussed with my team, I reviewed these actions with my team and looked at what priorities there were and looked at how we could ensure that matters were addressed as quickly as possible.
Were you asked to explain your progress with actions during the meeting?
Yes, there was a discussion about.
And what did you say?
I don't remember the detail now.
Can we then go to the FRA review meeting on the 17th of December 2015, which you attended, and we can see a note of that meeting in your notebook at TMO 008797772, please, at page 56. And if you look at the top left-hand corner, this is again Daybook 7 of 8, you can see that there is an entry, FRA review meeting 17th of December 2015, and underneath that it says, you see it says AB to give CS access to certificates portal, allied protection. I think that's what it says. Correct me if I'm wrong about any of this. Alternatively, provide data or date to CS in advance of inspections. And then on the right-hand side next to the line, it says training and then I think standards, Adair doors, sprinklers. Is that correct?
Yes, it's data to CS Col Stokes.
Right, and then to the right of that it says something that looks like training. Is that right?
Training, standards, Adair, doors, sprinklers.
Now, can you first help us with the word? Is that standards underneath the word training?
Yes.
What was the detail of the discussions about Adair doors? Do you remember?
I think this is, so from memory, well, my memory isn't very clear on this. I had limited involvement in the discussion about the enforcement notices that were put in place about Adair. But there was a question about whether the existing doors were compliant, and there was discussion about a retrofitting program to install door closers. And I think that was what the discussion was about what standards were applied in the context of the existing doors meeting the building regs at that time, and whether there was a retrospective requirement to fit door closers, and in fact whether that fitting door closers retrospectively on those doors might have caused other problems.
Right, and that's in the aftermath of the fire that had happened in Adair Tower in October of 2015.
I think so, yes.
And what about sprinklers? What was that a discussion about?
That was about an action. So there was one of the outstanding actions related to. It goes back to the conversation we had earlier about Col Stokes and the actions coming from the fire risk assessments. So one of the items on his assessment would be service sprinkler systems in accordance with the manufacturer's requirements. And if you looked at the manufacturer's requirements, it would require a weekly inspection. These sprinklers that we were referring to here were actually in basement flats inside people's homes. So it was impractical to go and do a weekly inspection in somebody's home because it was impractical. So it was trying to understand. It was an example where we had an action, but we couldn't really action it. And so it was trying to find a resolution to that.
Now, other than the notes we've seen in your notebooks, did you take any other notes of this meeting?
No.
We haven't seen any minutes for this meeting. Can you explain why not?
I'm assuming this is a meeting with me and Alex Bosman.
Why are you assuming that?
I can't remember who else was at the meeting. I don't.
Right.
Or this may have been the meeting with Col Stokes that I was talked about earlier.
Right. I mean, it's called you enter it as an FRA review meeting.
I think so, from memory. I mean, I can't be sure. I mean, it would be noted in my diary who else might have been at that meeting. But I think this was the meeting where the contracts team and Col Stokes, myself and Janice Ray met to try and streamline the process, clarify how, because there are actions that are in the fire risk assessment actions that aren't being actioned because we'd hit obstacles such as where we can't service these sprinklers. Is there a practical way in which we could comply with the regulations while without having to go into that property every week, for example?
Now, it says AB, it's Alex Bosman, I'm assuming,
yes,
to give CS access to certificates portal.
Yes.
Was the certificates portal a database which contained the certificates issued in respect of fire safety measures within the TMO stock? So
that would have been, at that stage, I'm struggling to remember the actual timescale on this. So this would have been Allied Protection were the facilities management contractors, who were the newly mobilised facilities management contractors responsible for fire safety as well as other aspects. What we'd done is we'd amalgamated a series of contracts together to try and get the right contractor in who would have the right sort of commitment to investing in infrastructure like portals and databases that we required. And so this conversation, I think, was for Alex to give Col Stokes access so he could check certification before going to site. So rather than giving us or Alex's team an action to confirm that this is certified, Carl could know before he's going on site, like he could check all of the certification online and verify it on site, and that would remove some of the bureaucracy and speed up the process.
Right. Was the certificates portal called, or did it form part of the Keystone database?
So at this stage, it wasn't integrated with the Keystone interface, from memory. So Allied Protection had their portal. We were in the process of migrating all of the information into Keystone. There was a period from this point forward where that process of integration was happening.
I see.
Ultimately, it would have been in Keystone. All of the other services compliance figures were live and reported on a TV screen in the office, so we could see performance on a live basis. And that was the process we were going through at this stage with Allied Protection of actually collecting that data and importing it into Keystone.
Was Carl Stokes given access to the certificates portal?
I don't know. I assume so.
Why wasn't he given access before 17th of December 2015?
I'm assuming that Allied weren't on board at that time. This is about the mobilisation period of the contract. The other thing to mention, I suppose, as well, is that the Allied Protection portal was their way of communicating their certification to the TMO. But there was also a quality assurance process before the information was uploaded into Keystone. So there was a check by an independent expert to make sure that the certification was correct.
Yes. Did you take any steps yourself to monitor Mr. Stokes's access or his ability to access the certificates portal and then later the Keystone database, which would have contained that information?
I didn't have any personal contact with him about that.
Do you know who was responsible for facilitating Mr. Stokes's access to that information?
I would assume that would be between Alex and Janice.
I see. But you had no part of it?
No, Janice was the key point of contact with Carl.
If that's the case, can you tell us why it appears Janice Ray was not at the meeting you were having with Alex Bosman to ensure that Carl Stokes had access to the certificate?
She may have been at the meeting. I can't remember the meeting specifically. I would have imagined she would be there.
Can we go to TMO 00843-588, please? This is an email. I'd like to go to page 2 in that. It's an email run on the same day. And if you go to page 2, you can see that there's an email from Alex Bosman on the 17th of December 2015 at 12:52 to Janice Ray, Barbara Matthews, you and Sasha Jevons, subject FRA, hi all. It was really helpful to meet this morning. And I feel the new approach to reviewing the FRA actions will enable us to progress them in a timely manner. Had he expressed concerns before this about delays in closing out FRA actions?
Yes, there'd been an ongoing dialogue involving Alex and others about how we could make sure the process worked effectively.
Yes. And what were his specific concerns that he had previously raised?
I don't remember, but but the ones that we described that in the meeting we've just reviewed were suggestions from Alex about how we could streamline some of these processes.
Right.
And
when he says it was really helpful to meet this morning, obviously we can see from your diary that you were there. Does this tell us that Janice Ray, Barbara Matthews and Sasha Jevons were also at the meeting?
I certainly don't think Barbara or Sasha would have been there.
Right.
I think Janice probably was.
Right, I see. The new approach he refers to there, I've just read to you, what was that new approach to reviewing FRA actions?
The approach that we covered in the meeting that you saw in the minutes.
Right. And did the new approach enable the TMO to clear the backlog of FRA actions that had built up, which we've seen from the November meeting notes?
It was helping, and certainly so I think that would have streamlined that part of the process. A key part of this from the TMO's perspective was making sure mobilising the contract with Allied Protection rather,
right,
and making sure that worked, because I think we'd had a period of time where we had RGE as the contractor, which we looked at in the evidence yesterday, and that we parted company with that contractor and had an interim contract in place with Chubb, which for a couple of years, and that was really it was an interim emergency procurement to cover a vacancy at that time, and this was really this new contract with Allied Protection was really the first time that we'd had a properly structured procurement of a contractor who would take on all of those aspects.
Was the new approach that he refers to recorded in some kind of policy document or protocol?
I think the new approach is it's not a fundamental new approach. I think what he was flagging up is that there's a new approach of getting greater clarity from the way that actions from the fire risk assessments were communicated to Alex's team in a way that could be actioned effectively.
Doesn't look like that from the note of the meeting we saw. What it looks like from the note of the meeting we saw, leaving aside Adair and sprinklers, was that Carl Stokes would be given access to information, not that Alex Bosman would be given access to better information.
Well, Alex would have access to that information anyway, so that just the process of checking rather than creating actions to check would help, as would the giving access to the portal. But also there'd been an ongoing discussion about ensuring that the actions that were being communicated were actions that were able to be actioned through a direct order to a contractor rather than something that another third party needed to go and investigate. So I think that was sort of the cultural change that had come about over this period.
To summarise it, is the new approach essentially giving Carl Stokes access to certificates so as to pre-inform him about any particular piece of equipment in any particular building, so that it would speed up his work and also make his work clearer so that he could then direct you as to what needed to be done?
That was one strand.
What were the other strands?
So the other strand was about the tone and the clarity of what actions needed to be taken. So fire risk assessment actions were actions not to go and investigate, but actions to go and do this piece of work. So that was the most important part of this, because actually a significant number up to that point, a significant number of actions were for my team who weren't experts to go and investigate something and agree what needed to be done. So that meant we would have to get other people to give advice, and so it was about streamlining a process and getting clarity about what actually needed to be done as a result of those actions.
Right, but that second strand doesn't appear in your manuscript note of the meeting we saw.
It's been part of the dialogue of all of the discussions that we've been having through this morning.
Can we then move into 2016, please, and go to the Health and Safety Committee meeting of the 19th of January 2016? I'd like to show you your first witness statement at page 43, please. And let's go to paragraph 219 on that page. Page 43 of your first witness statement, paragraph 219. And you say, I attended a Health and Safety Committee meeting on the 19th of January 2015, attended by the TMO managers and staff. During this meeting, you exhibit the note, as recorded at paragraph 3.2, I asked to see a copy of the detail behind the report on the backlog of outstanding actions in relation to fire-related deficiencies, and indicating my view that the system should be more robust to ensure actions are escalated if they are out of time. There was confirmation that the process would be reviewed. Now, to be clear, I think, in fact, you meant 2016, not 2015, in your statement. Is that right?
I'm not sure.
Well, let's just look at the document then. Let's go to TMO 10011,987 at page 3. And if you go to that first page, you can see that the minutes certainly say 2015 at the top, when you are in attendance. But in fact, it's right, isn't it, that the Adair Tower enforcement notice came in December 2015. Do you remember that?
Sorry, I'm looking at. I'm confused about the timing. What we're trying to establish here.
I'm trying to establish here that in fact the date of this minute was actually 2016, as opposed to 2015.
These minutes.
Yes. That your statement and these minutes themselves actually should have borne the date 2016 and not 2015.
Okay, I'm not sure. I don't think I can.
And if you go to paragraph 3.6, you can see that there's a reference there to the process for deficiency notices relating to paper 3 in the meeting documents. That's what we saw earlier on. And if we want to go back to that, we can do that. TMO 00840480. Let's quickly go back to that. And you can see that here is the procedure, and it's dated January 2016. So it makes sense, doesn't it, that the reference to this document, which is January 2016, could only be made at a meeting in or after January 2016 and not January 2015.
I'm sorry, I'm not really following.
Well, the date of the meeting is January, according to the minute, is January 2015.
Okay.
There's a reference in the minute to this paper, and this paper is dated January 2016.
So you're saying yeah, I don't know, but
Okay, right, but it's a matter of record. Let's go to item 3 on page 3 of the minute then. Back to that, TMO 100111987. And if you go to page 3 under 3.1, W2 workflow FRA actions, it says, JW and BM highlighted the main points of the FRA summaries. PM asked for the detail behind this report. PM noted that the system should be more robust to ensure actions are escalated if they are out of time or allocated to staff who are no longer with the organisation. GW advised the process will be reviewed to avoid outstanding historic actions. Now, we can see that you asked to see the detail behind the report on the backlog of outstanding actions. Was the report to which you were referring there the FRA current progress with completion of actions summary that Janice Ray had produced? Do you remember that?
I don't remember, sorry.
Okay, let's look at that. TMO 100111910. This is a document, paper 2, FRA and H&S, current progress with completion of actions, fire risk teams summary. Is that the report that you are asking to see the detail behind?
Possibly, yes.
Well, let's go to page 2, see if that makes any better sense to you. This is fire risk assessments, actions, progress with completing actions. And then there are the teams again set out, contract management, project management, etc., with the age profile of outstanding actions.
Yes.
Was that the report?
Yes, I think that was
Right.
that's the sort of report I was looking for, but
Now, what you say you wanted the detail. What information were you lacking?
so what would have helped me would have been if those actions required were broken down by age profile too.
Could you just be clear about what you mean?
Okay, so for example, if in the 4 to 6 months schedule,
In the middle of the column there.
where there are 15, if that broke that down into, of those, 5 are amber, 5 are green, 5 are red,
I see.
and that would have allowed me to understand whether they were in date or out of date, and therefore where I could focus attention on making sure that those actions were addressed.
Well, you're told whether they're in date or out of date in one sense, aren't you? Or
No, because those 15 documents could all be green and have a 6-month timescale.
so I see. So you were lacking information that told you, one, whether these were in date or out of date, and two, what their risk profile was.
Yes.
That's, I think, what you're telling us. And why was that information not something you'd had long before?
It was available in the granular detail, but I felt that for the purposes of this meeting, where we're looking at corporate level, that everybody should have sight of that. Not just myself, but also other members of the organisation.
Right. I mean, the risk profile, the traffic light system, is something you knew existed and that you'd been asking for by now almost, just about 3 years.
Well, each action had a priority to it, so that was clearly communicated to the head of services. But I felt that as a monitoring tool corporately, it would have been helpful to have been able to see this at this level, so
right.
that.
Well, why hadn't you had that kind of information before that, given the previous requests for that kind of data?
I can't answer that.
Right. Was the system simply not picking these actions up?
No, the actions were all picked up. They were all progressed. This was about having an overview and ensuring that the correct actions were taken, and people were held to account if they weren't.
Right. And we could see, just looking at contract management, that there were still 69 out of 678 outstanding, most of which, 35, were 12 months plus. That must have caused you some concern.
It did. I mean, it did. It was good that the figures were much lower than they had been previously. So there was the trend was downwards, but there were still some issues that needed to be addressed here. And some of those things were related to, there were some sticky issues in terms of the sprinkler matter that I raised earlier. So there were some issues that we had to find a way of resolving, a practical way of resolving. And these figures show that significant progress had been made, but there was still some way to go. This was at the time when we were also mobilising the new facilities management contract, which we felt was really going to be the piece with that.
I mean, on the face of it, what this tells us, is this right, that whatever was known by those within your team, you didn't have a grip on the risk profile or the precise age profile, whether they were outstanding or not, of some 10% of outstanding contract management items.
Sorry, where does the 10% come?
69 out of 678.
No, that's not the case. There was the process we've described. Each of the teams had a full report of all of their actions by priority with the detail and the names against them. What I was after was a high-level summary to help the corporate health and safety committee see the risk profile and the progress and the trends that were in action here. So that information was available. I felt that this was a way of strengthening and improving some of that information. It wasn't saying that the system wasn't working. It just meant that I felt there was a different way of giving greater clarity.
Yeah. I mean, by this time, this is January 16, it looks as if you had been after, even at high level, for your own benefit, a risk profile analysis and an outstanding profile analysis for almost 3 years. Did it not strike you by this time that you still weren't getting that information in your hands? Yes,
but the granular detail was available and was being actioned. And this, information did show that the progress was being made, but I felt that this, it would have been helpful to have developed that into so that each of those numbers could be broken down into priority.
But this is just another request, isn't it, for the same information that you'd been asking for repeatedly for years?
Yes.
Did it not strike you as problematic that although you had been asking for the same information for years, you had still not got it?
It was problematic, but it wasn't problematic to the point that I couldn't talk to my team and look at the detail of the granular detail with them.
Right. And that was always the case, was it?
Yes.
And if that was always the case, why did you need the information at all?
Because I thought it would be helpful. It would be helpful to me, and I thought it would be helpful to the organisation.
I mean, the information that you were after could come from one or other of two sources. So it could either be given to you by Janice Ray, as you were asking, or it could be collated for you and presented to you by your teams. Now, did you ask Janice Ray again for that information?
I mean, it's on record what's been requested. In effect, what I did was go and talk to my teams and look at the detail with them where necessary.
Right.
But I felt that it would be better to have a single source of information to avoid any corruption potentially.
Right.
Corruption of that data, I mean.
If you ask to see the detail behind the report on the backlog of outstanding actions, as we can see from the minute, my question is, why did you ask that question if this was something that you could have got from your team?
I think I've explained as best I can as to why I felt that it would be good for the organisation to see this.
But why not just ask your team to prepare you a report?
That's what I did.
Right. But you say you asked, as we can see, you asked for detail behind this report. Why did you have to ask that at this meeting? Why not simply go to your team, go to Alex Bosman, for example, and say, can I please see the detail behind this paper that I have received?
That's what I would do.
You did do that?
Yes.
And I just wonder why it was necessary to raise it in a formal meeting.
Because I still feel that this information would be better if it was broken down in that way. And maybe somebody should have said no if there wasn't going to happen, but I don't think that did happen.
Now, we can see that, if we go back to the minute, TMO 100111987, page 3, that at 3.2 on page 3, it says GW, that's Graham Webb, isn't it?
Yes.
And he's repairs direct, isn't he?
He is.
He advised the process will be reviewed to avoid outstanding historic actions. Had you by this time met Repairs Direct in order to discuss the issue of outstanding FRA actions? No.
I don't believe I did, because they were discrete entities. I mean, there may have been some crossover at some areas and need for some discussion, but Graham Webb's team would deal with responsive repairs.
Right. Can we look at the foot of the page, paragraph 3.9? Deficiency notices are usually sent to relevant ESA manager. PM asked for a live summary of what's being circulated, JW to provide. SJ commented that there's a need to carry out a trend analysis to interrogate the data and check that actions are carried out and escalated appropriately. Why did you request the live summary there?
I think I wanted to know what was being required from the fire brigade, so we could anticipate and action these things.
And was that because you felt that there was insufficient information being circulated generally about deficiency notices?
I can't remember, but I think that must have been the issue, that maybe some of the deficiency notices hadn't been communicated to all sections of the organisation. But also sometimes the deficiency notices, sometimes the approach of the fire brigade might change for different reasons, so they may start enforcing action on things that previously they hadn't been. So it was about understanding what was happening, and so we could ensure that we could anticipate that and address matters before these issues arose. Now,
the next Health and Safety Committee meeting took place on the 12th of April 2016. can we please look at the minutes from that meeting? TMO 00840545. And we can see from page 1 that you were in attendance, third attendee down. And can we go please to page 3 in that and look under the FRA section, item 4.1, W2 workflow, FRA actions. JW welcomed the significant drop in the number of outstanding actions for both FRAs and H&S actions. BM acknowledged the progress made and advised that the Chief Executive remained anxious that all actions older than 6 months should be completed as a matter of urgency. A. Bos, that's Alex Bosman, added that his team currently has a further 50-plus actions which have been confirmed as complete and will be fully completed on W2 ASAP. Now, you can see that there's mention here of a significant drop in FRA actions, but still a note of concern by the Chief Executive, Robert Black, there, that all actions older than 6 months should be completed as a matter of urgency. Was that a significant matter for everyone involved in closing out FRA actions?
Yes.
And therefore an urgent priority to correct?
Yes.
I mean, the Chief Executive was onto you and you needed to be done. Yes?
Yes, but we all recognise the priority that this had.
Yeah. Now let's then look at the next Health and Safety Committee meeting in June, 14th of June. Minutes of that are at TMO 00840607. And again, you're in attendance, as you can see from the column on the right, second name down. Can we please go to page 3 and look at item 4? Fire safety and fire risk assessments, FRA actions there. And underneath that, at item 4.1, BM, Barbara Matthews, noted the good progress being made with these. However, the Chief Executive is anxious to have all older actions completed as a matter of priority. Now, that would suggest, would it not, that no sufficient progress had been made on the older 6 months plus actions since the April meeting, the minutes of which we've just looked at?
I don't think it says there's no progress, but I think it's recognising that is still a priority that we need to do.
Does it follow that those issues had not been addressed as an urgent priority as Mr. Black had required?
I don't know. I don't believe that's the case.
Was it a disappointment to discover that you were letting down the Chief Executive in his expectation that outstanding matters of 6 months plus would be cleared off as a matter of urgency?
We were all working really hard to try and address the issue and make sure that this was that all actions were within date, and we'd gone through a very thorough and rigorous process to ensure that we had the infrastructure in place to be able to do that, and to ensure that we had the systems in place to be able to measure and monitor it. And that wasn't just the fire risk assessment actions, that was about all of the actions which we measured through our Keystone system. And so this was a process that we were devoted a significant amount of energy and focus on.
Right. I mean, were Robert Black's expectations of urgent completion of these outstanding FRA actions realistic?
I think they were challenging, but I think that was right to be challenging.
Did anybody go to Robert Black and say, look, we have a process in place, but it's going to take a little bit more time than you're pushing us for?
There was a regular update through this process, and also through the governance arrangements, through the operations committee, and through the rest of the governance of the organisation. So there was a narrative on what was happening, what actions were being taken, what the progress was in each of those areas. But it was clear, our priority was clear, that we wanted to get all of these actions within date.
Now, looking at item 4.2, it says, PM, that's you, advised that the 3 contract management actions which are over 12 months old all relate to the maintenance of sprinklers within dwellings. It's accepted that the British Standards requirement for weekly inspections is not achievable, so either an alternative and less onerous inspection regime that is acceptable to the LFB needs to be agreed, or the possibility of removing these investigated. JW agreed to query inspection regime with the assessor and liaise with PM and ABOS to agree a way forward. In fact, it appears that you or your team had 3 actions over 12 months old, as is clear from that. Not just 6 months, but 12 months, yes?
That looks to be the case.
And your approach, is this right, was to try to reduce the requirements of the British Standard inspection regime, as opposed to providing the resources to carry out that regime?
I don't think it was the British Standards regime. I think that minute's inaccurate. I think it was the manufacturer's recommendation. So the action that came from Carl Stokes, so this is an example of the sort of actions that couldn't really be actioned in reality. So Carl Stokes' action from his fire risk assessment would be service this sprinkler system in accordance with the manufacturer's guidelines. And the manufacturer's guidelines would say test this weekly. These were sprinkler systems in individual properties and basements of townhouses, and that would mean we would have to get in access into those flats on a weekly basis to test that those sprinklers were working. That was impractical.
It may have been impractical, but it's what the British Standards requirement was, wasn't it?
It was the manufacturer's requirement, was
right.
That, and so it wasn't something that we had the ability to do. I mean, these properties were tenanted; people would be at work. It was impractical to go into people's homes on a weekly basis.
I can see that you say it was impractical, but in fact, isn't that just another word for resourcing?
No, I mean, it's a great inconvenience to people if they have to be in their house once a week to have their sprinkler serviced or sprinklers tested that they're working. So it was about understanding a more practical way of ensuring that this was done.
Now, the next meeting takes place on the 13th of September 2016, and the minutes are at TMO 100147979. And again, we can see that you are in attendance at that meeting. Can we go to page 2, please? FRA actions under item 4. And you can see in the first line that Barbara Matthews raises the concern that there was still a volume of actions outstanding and reiterated the need for these to be given priority and completed ASAP. Then if you go down towards the end of that point, she says BM hoped to see substantial improvement on these figures at the next meeting, particularly any actions over 6 months old. And I've read about 5 lines up from the bottom there. You see that?
Yes.
So it's clear that even by this time now, 13th of September 2016, there was still a significant volume of actions outstanding. Do you agree?
I can't see the figures, but I presume there were figures presented in this meeting.
Well, she says there is still a volume of actions outstanding. And I take it from that the volume of actions was significant rather than insignificant.
I don't have recollection of what those actions were specifically.
Was it your impression at this meeting that, notwithstanding all the efforts that have been put into this process over the previous years and months, there was still a need for substantial improvement in getting FRA actions completed?
There was a clear focus on it, and the point at the last point in there was that where Alex Bosman confirmed that the new facilities management contract was due to start later this year, and that was a significant part of the last piece of the jigsaw of compliance, which was the facilities management contract included the work we intended to do with Allied Protection, and that would have there's also a risk at this stage, I think, that we'd procured that new contract, and the outgoing contractor, there was going to be a handover between 2 contractors, which is always an area where there can be turbulence in terms of performance.
And you can see that Barbara Matthews is hoping to see substantial improvement at the next meeting. And then she says, particularly any actions over 6 months old. It looks from that there was still at least a significant, by which I mean meaningful, number of actions which were over 6 months old, which were troubling Miss Matthews. Is that right?
that looks like that's what she's minuted, yes.
Why was that a problem that you hadn't been able to get rid of, notwithstanding Robert Black's imperative given to you back in the April?
I mean, Barbara's comments on the corporate figures, I don't know what the specifics are for my team.
I mean, it looks as if she was on at you, effectively, to sort out actions over 6 months old. What was the problem?
But this wasn't me particularly, this was
on at the group.
The group, yes.
What was the problem?
I think that the issue at this stage was I think we'd seen significant improvement over time, and I think we'd reached a point where in mobilising the new facilities management contract, there was going to be a bit of turbulence, but beyond that, there was going to be a significant improvement.
And if we want to look at the figures, we can. It's at they are at TMO 100147787. Let's look at those just to be clear, since you raised the point. This is paper 4, addressed to that meeting. And you can see that for A&R contract management and A&R project management, there are the figures of fully complete 695 and 59, with 90 outstanding and 14 outstanding, respectively. See that? Mm-hmm. And then if you go to page 2, we can see the age profile. We've still got, under contract management, some 66, which are 4 to 6 months old. Mm-hmm. None at the 7 to 12 range, but 2 over 12 months.
So presumably the 2 over 12 months are the sprinklers.
Right.
That we'd had an issue with. So if you take those out, we've achieved the target within 6 months within the contract management team.
And under project management, you've got 11 of 12 months plus. What was that about?
Don't remember the details, but I think my previous answer was that relating to longer term, low priority issues requiring access is typically what would be addressed there.
Can we then go to the Health and Safety Committee meeting of the 19th of January 2017? That's at TMO 100160020. And we can see that you're there. Third individual down. Can we go to page 2, please? Again, under FRA actions, customarily now, item 4, and look at 4.1 and the minute notes. BM raised concerns that there were a large number of actions outstanding that are over 12 months. At the next meeting, each of the teams with outstanding actions will need to explain their action plan to clear these down. What had happened in the year between January 2016 with the adoption of the improved procedure, which we saw in your diary, and January 2017 that meant that there were still outstanding FRA items from before January 2016 that had still not been completed?
So are these minutes the minutes of the following meeting from the report that we've just looked at previously?
No. So they're the next meeting on?
Yes. So the previous meeting was...
The previous meeting was in September 16.
And this is January.
This is January 7.
So if there were no actions outstanding over 6 months in my team at the previous quarter, there couldn't have been any over 12 months at the following meeting. So I'm assuming that none of those actions over 12 months are with my team, unless there's been some change in the data.
Well, my question is a different one. Can I just perhaps have an answer to it? What had happened between January 2016, and the adoption of the improved procedure, and January 2017 that meant that there were still outstanding FRA items from before January 2016?
But it sounds like the improved procedure had brought the figures down to no items over 6 months old. And then 3 months later, there couldn't be any over 12 months old. So I'm assuming that this minute doesn't relate to my service.
Well, let's look at the statistics for this meeting at TMO 100159663. these are the stats compiled for this meeting, to which Ms. Matthews is speaking, one assumes. And it's paper 4, dated 12th January 2017. And we can see that under A&R contract management, you've got 95 outstanding out of 755, and 12 out of 62 for project. And if we go to the age profile on page 2 now, you can see you've still got 2 over 12 months for contract management and 11 over project management for project management.
So I think the 2 over 12 months will be the same as the 2 over 12 months at the previous meeting.
Yeah. So
as I said, none of the actions that were mentioned in Barbara's minute relate to the assets, to the contract management team. It looks as if there is some movement there between the 4 to 6 months to over 6 months old so that 46 actions in 7 to 12 months has moved. And I think that is the issue that I was flagging up in relation to. This is the period where an outgoing contractor has swapped over to a new contractor, and I think there was some communications issues at this stage in terms of actions being progressed. New actions new issues would be identified by new contractors, but my understanding is that there was a bit of a lag in terms of the reporting at this time with the new mobilised Allied Remedial Allied Protection contract.
In relation to the 2 over 12 months old that we see there, are these the same actions that remained unresolved, or was it a new pair of 12-month plus?
It couldn't have been a new pair because you would have seen it as coming between in the timeline. So it must be the same actions, and I'm assuming it's the actions relating to the sprinkler systems that I referred to.
And there are now 46 actions that have come in at 6 months plus.
Yes, and I think that was an issue related to the mobilisation of the new contract and some turbulence in the communication of those actions.
Were you not concerned when you saw these figures?
Yes, that's why I spoke to the contracts manager and got an understanding of what the issues were. And my recollection is that this was about an under-reporting and under-communication issue from the newly mobilised contract with Allied Protection.
Did you actually provide an action plan, as Barbara Matthews had asked?
Well, Barbara Matthews' minute was about actions over 12 months, and none of those actions related to me other than the 2 that we've discussed, which we'd agreed an alternative.
Did you provide an action plan in relation to those 2?
Yes. Well, an action plan would be overstating. I think we came to an agreement about how we would effectively service and communicate the servicing of those sprinklers, but not carry out weekly inspections. That was agreed with the fire risk assessor.
Right. If we go back to the minute, though, I think you may have perhaps misread what the minute says. She's expressing concern that there were a large number of actions over 12 months. At the next meeting, each of the teams with outstanding actions will need to explain their action plan to clear these down. Was your understanding that the action plan should only relate to outstanding actions over 12 months, or all outstanding actions?
Well, I read that minute as saying I read that minute now as saying over 12 months. However,
what was your understanding at the time?
I don't remember, right. but I did expect that at each health and safety corporate meeting there would be a discussion about progressive fire risk assessments. It was very much on the agenda, and it was very much a high priority for the organisation.
Now, just going back, if we can, to the statistics that we saw, the intervening document, TMO 100159663, we can see on page 1 there that A&R project management had 12 outstanding actions, of which 12 outstanding actions, of a total of 78 allocated. And if we go to page 2, we can see in relation to those, 11 of the 12 had been outstanding for more than 12 months. Now, if we go then to the statistics for the next meeting, which is in March, 16th of March 2017, that's at TMO 100-16217, we can see how that's developed. And the second item down there, A&R Project Management and Technical Systems Team, you see, has essentially cleared all of the outstanding items. If you look at the second item down, there are none outstanding. The 12 in brackets figures relates to the 12th of January figures. And you can see that from the footnote, tiny little footnote at the bottom left-hand corner. Yes? Mm-hmm. So it had been successful in clearing all outstanding FRA actions. Would you agree that your department had outstanding actions when Barbara Matthews ordered the teams that actions needed to be resolved or an explanation provided? In other words, once she'd put the whip on, things moved.
It was a corporate priority. It wasn't a case of responding to Barbara. I think Barbara was right to be raising concerns and keeping the pressure on the teams. We all shared that as a corporate priority, and a lot of action had gone into ensuring these things were delivered. I mean, the 12 actions on the project management team there they'd been there a long time. And the reason they've been there a long time is that those capital programs tend to have a long lead-in time, a long procurement. And so that has obviously run its course and been completed. But the piece around the contract management piece, which was a much larger issue and a challenge to actually make sure that we were collecting and managing data effectively, having the right contractors in place to manage all of those assets of all properties, not just the properties that came out of the fire risk assessments. And that was a much larger challenge, and it did take some time to get into a stronger position on that.
Now, if we go down to page 2 in this document, you'll see the age profile for project management and technical systems. You've now got none outstanding, as we've seen. But those that had been cleared off included the 11 from 12 months plus. Do you remember what those long-standing unresolved actions were?
Not specifically, but they'd be detailed in the reports that Janice reported to the head of...
Do you know how those were cleared?
I don't.
Do you know why they had not been cleared before Barbara Matthews issued her imperative?
They would have been, as I described, they would have been part of a capital contract that would have taken a long lead in to procure. They would have been, once that work was completed, confirmation would be then communicated from the capital programs team back to Janice's team, who would then close off the actions.
Right. Do you know that, or is that just...
That's how the process works.
Surmise. Right, that's how the process worked. You don't know specifically what these, or any of these 11 was?
Not off the top of my head. The details will be in the specific reports that are communicated to the head of capital project.
Did you look at those yourself to ask yourself the question, I wonder what those 11 were and why they weren't cleared off until...
I would have done at the time, yeah.
And what was the answer?
I can't remember.
Right. Can we look then at the actions outstanding at June 2017? At the moment we're now in March, but let's look forward to June 2017. TMO 100171116, please. These are the actions outstanding at 7th of June, a week before the fire at Grenfell Tower. And we can see now on that page that there are, for A&R contract management, 73 outstanding of a total allocated of 931. So that's gone up from 65 in March 2017. But if we look at the age profile on page 2, we can see that for contract management, you've now got 12 in there for 12 months plus, and 17 in there for 6 months plus. How come?
I think this. So, I think the issue here was around the mobilisation of the Allied Protection Contract, which started towards the end of the previous year, but it was mobilising in this initial period. The initial stage of that was about was focused on ensuring that double checking that the asset register was correct and that we had all of the assets that needed to be serviced identified, and there was some issues in getting information back from Allied Protection to populate the database and to close off these actions. So I think a lot of these actions had actually been complete but hadn't been recorded as complete by the contractor.
Right. Did you explain that in a document anywhere at the time with Barbara Matthews or anybody else?
No, I spent time with the contracts management team at the time looking at understanding the detail of this, and I understood that narrative and understood what was happening, and I understood there was action being taken to make sure that these actions were being communicated and closed out.
So do I understand your evidence to be that, in fact, these outstanding items should have been on the earlier documents that we saw from January or March, but just didn't make it onto those summary documents because of backlogs in data processing?
Now, I'm saying that some of the actions that were taken place in the first half of that year, in the first 6 months of the contract, hadn't been closed out effectively.
Right. So there's a lag there.
Yes, so there's a lag. So, and I think there was this lag was at a period where Chubb, the interim contractor, was demobilised, and there was a new contractor mobilising, and there was a crossover between the two contractors, and there was also an issue about communication of those actions.
Right. Would you accept that Barbara Matthews, as we've seen, had repeatedly asked you and others for some time that the backlog of FRA actions needed to be addressed and completed as a priority?
Yes.
Yeah. And yet, at mid-June 2017, your department still had a significant number of outstanding FRA actions.
In the figures that were being produced, yes, but I think those figures weren't accurate at that time.
Did Barbara Matthews ask you for an explanation?
It would have been discussed at this meeting.
And what did you tell her?
I would have reported what I've said.
And we can see from this document, and as we could from the January and the March versions of the document in the format which has now become familiar to us, that although you're getting age profiles, you're not getting, even now, the risk colour coding or the precise figures for how long these have been outstanding, are you?
No.
That you've been after. Why is that?
I don't know.
So, in fact, from February of 2013 through to June 2017, 4 and a bit year period, you didn't in fact get the high-level summary in either risk profile terms or period outstanding terms, which would enable you to have a dashboard so that you could tell of the outstanding actions, not only how long they've been outstanding for, but also how risky they were.
This was the information that was provided. There was a report that had the granular detail in, so it was possible to extract that information at that stage, but it wasn't reported at high level at this level.
But I think the answer to my question is yes, you didn't get that high-level summary ever.
I don't believe I did.
No. How did you allow yourself not to get that which you had repeatedly asked for years?
I got the information through a different route. So instead of getting the information at this level, which I felt would be useful, I recognised the information was there in the granular level in my team, and that's where I would go and have those discussions.
Now, we've been through a long history of this over the last almost day, Mr. Maddison, and I'd like to apologise for taking you through it slowly, I hope slowly enough. During the period that you attended operational health and safety meetings and the health and safety committee meetings, of the TMO, do you agree that there was continual and frequent discussion about the importance of clearing FRA actions?
Yes.
Do you agree that those discussions were already taking place when you joined the TMO in January 2013?
Yes.
And that they were still taking place in the days before the fire?
Yes.
Do you agree that the reality was that the Assets and Regeneration Department never fully got to grips with completing FRA actions?
I don't agree with that. I think that there's been a significant journey here of progress from where we were at the outset, and we had put in place an infrastructure which would allow us to that had reduced the number of actions significantly, the number of outstanding actions significantly, and the age profile significantly. It had been brought into within 6 months at the turn of the year, and there had been some delays in communicating information between the contractor and this reporting in the 6 months before this report. So I think there'd been significant action, and we were in control of that at that time.
And do you agree that you never, in fact, got ahead of the completing of the FRA actions, but were always playing catch-up?
It had been a significant journey, and I think we were in a strong position at this stage.
You might have been getting better, one might say, but you never actually got ahead, but were always playing catch-up.
I think there was. We were certainly determined to improve things, and there was always an area that we wanted to improve and thought we could improve. We did carry out benchmarking across other parts of the sector to try and establish where we were, and actually felt, understood that we were in a stronger position than many, and we took it very seriously. It was something that we put a lot of effort and a lot of energy into, and we were aware of what else was happening in the sector and trying to understand how we could learn and make things better. And that was really where a lot of our focus was.
Did the TMO Health and Safety team, those in charge of it, actually ever ask you the question, why has your team failed to complete FRA actions, and why are you still playing catch-up?
There was an ongoing dialogue. I mean, the process of fire risk assessment and actions and inspection is an ongoing process. It's an endless process. By its very nature, it has to be. So it will always be a case of there'll be times when there will be ebbs and flows of in that process, and I think that the progress we'd made taking a significant number of outstanding actions down to a much smaller number, and reducing the number of increasing the turnover of those was a significant piece of work.
But in fact, the backlog of outstanding FRA actions was never actually cleared before the date of the fire, was it?
I don't think that the number of actions outstanding will ever go down to zero. There will always be something to be actioned in that programme.
I'm talking about the backlog. The backlog was never actually defeated.
I think it was in control at this time.
Right. I'm going to change to a slightly different topic now, which is risk levels, and that then moves into self-closing devices. They link. Can I go back, please, to the TMO's fire safety strategy? We looked at it yesterday. It's a TMO 00830-598. Let's just look at page 1 again, just to refamiliarise yourself with the document. I think you said yesterday that you weren't familiar with it. Is that correct?
Yes.
If we go to page 15, again, we went there yesterday, but just again to fix it in time, it's dated November 2013 under the hand of Janice Ray. Can we look now inside it at section 14 on page 9 and look at paragraph 14.1.3. We looked at this yesterday. The LFB's request in advance of starting the assessments, a successful consultant was introduced to the LFB's fire safety team, etc. And then you can see in the second bullet point, and there's the traffic light system, and then the third bullet point, actions would be progressed in order of risk, with priority being given to those with a red or amber rating. And then if we go to page 10, we can see under 14.4.2, it says, where a high priority action cannot be progressed with the appropriate degree of urgency, such as where significant resources and/or lengthy procurement are required, then interim measures to reduce the fire safety risk in the short term will be implemented. Specifically, these interim measures will be contingency plans instigated when fire protection measures are out of use, their repair is delayed, etc. Now, I think you said yesterday that you weren't familiar with this document. Do we take it from that you never actually read it?
I think I'd have, when I say I wasn't familiar, I couldn't quote it verbatim, but I'm sure it had been presented. It's committee.
It was produced in the year you joined. Were you told that the TMO should put in place interim measures where the priority was assessed as red or high, but not for other risk ratings?
I wasn't, so no.
Were you told that interim measures would be adopted where significant resources or lengthy procurement was required?
Not specifically, I don't remember.
Not specifically at all?
I don't remember.
Do you remember any case where interim measures were put in place in accordance with this part of the policy that I've just read out to you?
I don't recall. I would assume that any conversation along these lines would be between Janice and the teams responsible for any actions. So if there was an action that was a high priority that couldn't be actioned, there would be a dialogue there about any appropriate remedial activities that or interim activities that may be required.
Right. You say you'd assume there'd be a conversation between Janice and the teams responsible. Does that mean that you wouldn't be party to those conversations?
Generally, I would assume not. So the actions would go from the health and safety team to, say, the contracts management team or the capital program team, and they would consider those actions. If those actions weren't able to be completed, there would be a communication back, or it would be discussion between the two parties about any actions that may be required in the meantime.
But if the high-risk FRA action was to do with A&R contracts management, why would you be left out of the loop in any communication between Janice Ray and the contract team members?
Because they were dealing with the operational issue, and would result in, they may bring me in if there was an issue that needed my involvement or needed to be resolved. But I would assume that most issues would be able to be resolved at that operational level.
No, we went through this a little bit yesterday, but does that mean that you would only ever get involved or have any oversight where there was something that required your input?
Yes.
So you had no ongoing monitoring of the of what was coming from Janice Ray to the contract teams?
Not in the detail, no.
Right. Going back to my point, do you not recall any specific instance of where an interim measure was required in respect of any particular high-risk FRA action that was outstanding?
I don't recall any specifics.
Right. Now, let's look at a chain of email correspondence at TMO 00869-184. Mr. Chairman, I've had both a note and a mumble behind me that this is an appropriate moment to break because this is quite a long chain. It is.
You should always listen to your junior.
Well, I was going to say, I was hoping to gain an extra 5 minutes, but maybe the answer to this is to break now and come back at 5 minutes to 2, if not inconvenient to everybody else.
Well, I think we can indulge you to that extent, Mr. Millett.
I'm grateful.
Mr. Maddison, for practical reasons, we're going to stop slightly early now, lunch hour, and we'll resume at 1 to 2, please.
Okay, thank you.
And please remember not to talk to anyone about your evidence over the break.
Okay,
All right?
thank you.
Thank you very much. Right, Mr. Millett, 5 to 2, please.
I'm grateful.
Thank you.